Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. The Hey Chaplain podcast talks to interesting people in law enforcement who say, "Hey Chaplain, I've got a story to tell and some hard-earned wisdom to share." As a patrol chaplain, I think you need to hear encouragement even when it comes to difficult topics. So my goal here is to bring you the most interesting people with the best possible wisdom to help you through every aspect of your career. This is episode 144, and we are going to talk about autopsies. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to take it too far, and you can go ahead and keep eating your breakfast. But I'm going to share with you my recent visit to observe an autopsy and also my conversation with the local chief death investigator. First, I made a recording of my thoughts as I drove to the coroner's office to observe an autopsy. Then I recorded my reaction immediately after experiencing my first autopsy. Finally, we're going to sit down with Chief Death Investigator Kelsie Gwartney. She's going to share how she got into the business of doing autopsies and what a police officer should know that I didn't know before you go observe an autopsy for the first time. But first, here's me, Chaplain Altick, driving to the coroner's office full of nervous energy. I am driving over to the coroner's office, and I'm going to attend an autopsy. When I think of milestone events that a police officer has to go through, one of them is the first time you're on a dead body call, and I've done that. And one of them is having to go to an autopsy. And a lot of times officers will do that when they become detectives or if they work in CSI. There's that first autopsy you have to go to. And I've never done that. And I thought, well, I can remedy that. I'm able to get in and make arrangements. I don't want to interfere with any death investigation at all. And so I won't be recording any of the actual exam. I'm going to go fill out whatever paperwork they want or need. I'm not particularly concerned about being around a dead body. I've done that a bunch. Seen every kind of body and every state of decomposition and all kinds of grotesque dismemberments and that sort of thing. I've seen a lot of that already, hundreds now. The question is whether the poking and prodding, the disassembly that happens in an autopsy, I'm not sure how I'm going to react to that. Typically when I'm around a dead body, it is in repose and the body is lying still and not being disturbed. At worst, we're going to have to roll it over, put it in a body bag, and a lot of times I'm on scene when that's happening. So I've seen a body get pulled at and tugged and zipped up and hauled down a flight of stairs like so much luggage. I've seen that, but I've not seen a body be cut open and have parts removed and weighed and that kind of thing. So that's maybe going to bother me a little bit. I don't think it'll affect me a lot. One of the factors that I don't know is that I'm not sure who will be doing the exam, which examiner, which person from the coroner's office is actually going to be doing the exam, and I don't know which detective or which CSI personnel will be there. And I would think I would feel better if I knew who it was going to be, because then I would have some sense going in of, okay, this is a person with a great sense of humor, or no, this is a very serious, stoic officer. I mean, this detective, he never jokes about anything. If I knew which one it was, I think that would put me at ease as far as knowing what to expect with the people around me, because I've also never been inside this facility. I've toured other medical examiners' offices, but I've never toured this one in particular. So there's just several unknowns where I'm more comfortable if I'm going into a place I've been before and I'm going to be around people I've been around before. that would make it easier for me to have a new experience if the place and the people were familiar. But in this case, the experience, the people, and the place are all unknowns, at least before I get out of the car and walk in the building. So we will see. But I'm expecting one of the medical examiners, a detective, and maybe someone from CSI. That's what I'm anticipating. I also wondered how I should dress for this, because I didn't know what day it would be on. Now, as it turned out, it's happening on a day on which I'm on call. And so I'm in the chaplain car wearing my chaplain garb. And so I'm wearing my normal, polo and tactical pants kind of chaplain outfit. So that solved that problem as far as should I be dressed up or should I be super casual, or what kind of what would be appropriate? So in this case, I am dressed in business casual, department approved clothing, so I don't have to feel like I'm out of place in that regard. Hopefully whoever is here is expecting me, and I'm not going to catch somebody completely off guard, like, oh, why is a chaplain showing up? That would be disappointing if I walked in and they said, oh, we don't let chaplains in here. Or worse, I walk in, they think I'm there to do a death notification for an employee. That's not cool. I've had that happen before at a fire station. I rolled up and they all met me at the door cursing and eyes wide as saucers. They were scared to death that a family member had died and I was there to notify them. All right, I am almost there, just working my way through traffic. And I am actually starting to feel a little bit of anxiety. Again, I've never been in this building. I don't know if I know any of the people that are going to be there. And it's a brand new experience. In a perfect world, I'm going to pull up at the same time as a detective or a CSI tech that I know. That would be a huge relief. Alrighty, I think that might have been the entrance. Forensic Medical. Naturally, there's not a parking space. I genuinely did not expect the parking lot to be full. All right, here I go. Wish me luck. There are two words that resonate with me now that I've gone through this experience. The first I used just there a moment ago, where I said disassembly. The other word will come up later with Chief Death Investigator Gwartney, and she'll say eviscerate. Both of those, disassembly and evisceration, perfectly describe what I just experienced. Here's my thoughts immediately after walking out of the building and running through the rain to get back into my car. All right, I am back in the car, and that wasn't so bad. I mean, it was eye-opening, but it wasn't, I didn't get sick. I didn't react badly. I didn't really feel that squeamish. In fact, I commented to one of the CSI guys that it was more difficult to watch the initial incisions because the subject was still whole, still a whole person, versus later when parts are being removed and, it's a little more, not violent, but a little rougher, and that seems like, okay, now the body's down to just parts and it's not as difficult to take as when
when you got a person who's laying there like, well, they could just be sleeping, and then you start cutting into them. That actually, I think, affected me more. That initial incision affected me more. But I had a detective and a CSI guy and an intern, and then 3 or 4 different doctors and technicians there in the facility. And so there's a whole group of us, and I like talking to cops. And so chatting with the detective and the CSI officer, that was an enjoyable hour and a half of chatting with those police officers. Now, 10 feet away, a body is being opened and and everything's being weighed and measured and what have you. And I faced it and watched it happen. It was interesting. The particulars of this case, which I won't go into, there were injuries specific to that case that would make this autopsy different than other autopsies. But it was interesting, like on an intellectual level. It was a little unnerving, just because wow, that's the inside of a human body, and there's a human tragedy associated with this. And in order to do this part of the investigation, they're going to get right in there and take body parts out and investigate them, which is kind of difficult to watch. And so that processing is a very impersonal experience. And so you have this human tragedy that's going on, and then you have this very impersonal, very rough, again, and not violent is not quite the right word because it's very technical. It's not, to me, violence implies that it's reckless, and this is not reckless, but it is a very rough experience to cut out all of those body parts and weigh and measure them and do all the things they do. That is difficult when, on the other hand, you have balanced this human tragedy of what happened to the individual. And my experience is always about paying respect to the dead. I want to make sure when the body is removed from the crime scene that there is the greatest reverence and respect. And then, of course, all the way at the end of this process, when there's a funeral, it's very much about respect for the dead. But preparing a body to be examined and then doing the examination and really preparing for an embalming and whatever, that's probably not something that you would want the loved ones to witness. It's like I said, it's unpleasant, and this is a terrible turn of phrase, but it's unpleasant to see how the sausage is made. And so there's some things that, with delicate sensibilities, maybe for a victim or for a family member of a victim, there's some processes, including this autopsy, that you probably wouldn't want the family to be privy to. They'd be better off just not knowing how this works. Also, it's interesting to watch it and whether I would want, like if I had the option to have a loved one autopsied, would I want that to happen to their body? Like I said, it's not meant to be disrespectful, but it is pretty rough, and everything's going to be cut out and taken out and then, eventually put back and whatever. But it's, if you think of your loved one and them being whole, would you want this process to even happen to them? Would that feel traumatic to you? If you understood what it was, if you said, yes, I definitely want my loved one autopsied, and then maybe years later you find out what an autopsy is actually like, would you feel okay with that? I mean, I guess some people would probably be fine. I wonder if everyone would be fine long term. I'm just not sure that would be okay with some people, but that's interesting to me. But I think I'm okay. Like I said, it didn't particularly bother me. In fact, the things that bothered me most were thinking of how other people might be bothered by this. I don't think that I would have wanted to witness an autopsy of an infant. I know those can be pretty difficult to go through that. That's just hard again, because again, just like a family member would sympathize, we all sympathize with children. And so I am very glad that this was not a child, especially a very young child. And I do worry about my officers, seeing some of this if they were to have a victim that they personally identify with, a child the same age as their own child, or just somebody that for whatever reason it resonates with them, that like, okay, I feel a connection to this person. I don't think I would want an officer to witness that autopsy. I do appreciate that a detective can go into the courtroom and say, look, I care about this victim and I was willing to be present at their autopsy, and that's why I was there. And it's not just to corroborate what the medical examiner says, but I went the extra mile and I was physically at this autopsy with the victim. So anyway, an interesting experience. I don't think I will volunteer to do this on the regular.
Okay, now we've heard from the amateur. Let's listen to the expert. Our guest today is Kelsie Gwartney. She is the Chief of Death Investigations and Administrator for the facility that I visited here in Kansas City. Here's Kelsie Gwartney. Hello, Kelsie. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm glad you're here today. I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate you accommodating me to, help arrange my observation of an autopsy.
Absolutely.
Appreciate everybody there. Was very professional, and it was a good experience overall.
Okay. That's what I like to hear.
Nobody's in trouble at the boss.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Good.
All right. You are the Chief Death Investigator here in Kansas City, Kansas, and also there's offices in Topeka and other locations. I mean, what are you in charge of exactly?
Yeah. So technically, I'm part of a private company, Forensic Medical. So they actually have offices. They're the Nashville office, and they oversee 2 in Texas. And then we're their branches in Kansas of Kansas City, Kansas, and Topeka. Okay. So I kind of oversee at this point operations for both of those offices.
How many counties send their autopsies to you guys?
Yeah, I would say total, we're probably into like the 50s or 60s by the time you count Kansas and Missouri.
So okay. Yeah. So like over a third of Kansas.
Yeah, I would say so. We have contracts also for hospital cases, for privates if families want them. Okay. And then a lot of the outside counties service with us, and then a handful we're direct coroner for.
How did you get into doing autopsies?
So I've been a military brat all my life, and my dad was a criminal investigator for a period of time. Okay. So I would say I kind of got into it a little early of just curiosity of that. Okay. And then going into school, I just was always interested in anatomy, kind of the science of things. So I went to Kansas State University for biology initially, and then kind of progressed into double majoring in criminology. Mm-hmm. And as part of that, I did an internship around, I want to say, my junior year.
At any point, did you want to be a cop?
I thought about it for about 2 seconds, decided very quickly was not for me. And then for a long time, I thought I wanted to do kind of lab work, like CSI, ballistics, that sort of thing is what I was thinking initially. And then during my time at K-State for that internship, I went to Maricopa County in Arizona and got to work in their investigations as well as some autopsy experience, and absolutely fell in love.
So you're out in the field and also back at the autopsy suite.
Yeah, I would say I got very lucky with that internship. I had no idea just how big of a county it was until I was dealing with it. Yeah. And I think they're like the 4th biggest county in the U.S. I mean, they just have case after case. And so I would go there. It was during a summer. So I was basically there every week, multiple days a week. And I would say I got 5 to 10 scenes, when I'm there, just because they were constantly going. Sure. So quick experience, which was awesome.
But that didn't turn you off to it.
No, quite the opposite. I very quickly realized that's what I wanted to do.
Really?
Yeah. Which, like I said, I always thought lab work. And then I did that internship and I thought, this is my wheelhouse. This is what I want to do. So when I came back, graduated, and then immediately jumped into assisting with autopsies. So forensic technician, autopsy assistant, that kind of thing. Did that for a few years, and then really wanted to get into investigations. So I kind of transitioned. For a while I was hybrid, doing some of both, and then went into investigations, and then been there for about 5-10 years now, just kind of working up. And now I kind of oversee all of our death investigators, MDIs, and then kind of our day-to-day operations.
Yeah, you've put in a lot of hours, and you were telling me earlier before we started recording that you've overseen thousands of autopsies. I mean, there's a percentage of those you were actually the one doing the cutting,
right?
But you've been involved in thousands.
My hands in, I would say for sure, between the two offices and just between kind of assisting with them, scenes, follow-up, definitely.
Yeah. Why did you know you wanted to do this? There's a lot about an autopsy that is off-putting.
Right.
It's foreign to what 99% of people ever experience. Why did you want to do more of it?
I wouldn't say necessarily the autopsy itself physically I was drawn to. It's more so that field and that specific portion of forensics field that's so big just ties a lot of things in for me. Like I said, I love anatomy. I like understanding the body, kind of the science behind it. So that portion, my curiosity portion, just investigations, being out in the field. I love talking to families. I love kind of getting that history, kind of tying things together to make things make sense is just the way my brain works.
Yeah.
I feel like I've had weird ties throughout my years there that have kind of confirmed my decision. As I've gotten more passionate about certain things in the field, skeletal cases, cold cases, forensic, genetic genealogy, those things that I'm really drawn to now, I don't think I ever would have really known had I not gone into it.
Sure.
I'm also a tissue recipient, so meaning donation. Body donation, organ tissue donation. I'm a recipient of that, and now I get to help other people coordinate that for somebody else.
Wow.
So it's just little pieces throughout time have kind of just confirmed, what I initially was drawn to during that internship for sure. And now that I've been out in the field, I don't see myself ever being in a lab. The ballistics, the lab work, obviously so important,
right.
But and the people that can do that, amazing. I could never see myself doing that. So I'm just so glad I did that internship and got exposed to it very early on.
Sure. So what does it take to move beyond the idea of cutting up a person and into I'm solving a problem, I'm bringing justice to a family, I am solving a mystery?
Yeah.
Where is the tipping point from okay, this is a person that I'm going to get real involved in here?
Right.
How do you move from that to the more clinical, we're going to solve what happened to this person?
I mean, I think the best way I can describe it is just knowing your ability to disassociate from, the physical aspect of it. Once you get past this doesn't smell very good, I don't like what I'm looking at. Once you get past that, and a lot of people are like germaphobes, that sort of thing that you tie an autopsy to of I'm disgusted. Once you get past that and you look at it of a medical, let me try to find some answers. Let me look for pieces of clues to things to really get the family an answer of our ultimate goal is what is cause and manner of death.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. And then everything else is just you're tying it in. Okay, let me talk to the family. Let me get their medical records. Let me see what law enforcement did. That's really our job of tying everything together to make that determination. And then whatever that determination is kind of leads to how everything else goes.
Is that what satisfies you? Is getting that determination, getting that answer, or is there some other aspect of it?
I would say a portion of it, yes. Like I said, I like to kind of tie things together and get an answer. I like to solve problems, I would say.
Yeah.
And that for me is that portion, but then also the back end of it of, okay, now we've answered that question. So now what does that look like for family and law enforcement? What road can they go down now that we've answered the question?
Yeah. Okay. So, are there things you can't eat anymore?
Not anymore. I can really only think of one time that really became a thing for me. And it was, and I don't know how detailed you want me to get. It was a cooler where someone had been dismembered and mixed with certain foods in this cooler. It was a transient situation, so they were kind of living out of that cooler.
Yeah.
So, you've got personal things in there.
There's food and there's body parts together.
Yep, and there's toiletries. It was, you get everything in there. And that's when I was an autopsy tech. So physically, I'm the one handling and removing things from that cooler. And so physical body parts mixed with certain food. And at the time...
That's too far,
right? Yeah, it's a little too far. So I'm trying to think of better ways to say it.
The stereotype in television and movies is that pathologists and the technicians that work with them are just unflappable. They'll literally eat a sandwich over the cadaver.
I would say that's true. People that have been in the field long enough, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Right. It just doesn't become, I think I said it earlier to you.
They're nose blind to it.
It's like you walking in and getting a cup of coffee and like typing some emails. To them is walking into an autopsy suite and cutting open a body.
Yeah.
I mean, really, to put it, it is what it is.
It's not just for yourself, but speaking also for the people that work for you. Does the job affect their relationships? Are there people whose, their girlfriend or boyfriend just ducks out and says, I can't date a person who cuts open bodies?
Yeah.
Does that happen? Or
it does.
Because I think every mother whose child wants to go into this field thinks, well, you'll never get married.
Right. I see one of two ways. And it's funny because I feel like I'm kind of the outlier on this. I see some who are married to what I would consider people in the field, nurses.
Okay.
EMS.
Their spouse can understand.
Yeah, they can understand. They're in that wheelhouse. Then, like myself, complete opposite. Where, my husband is very good at math, IT, that's his wheelhouse, and if it's blood related, body related, not what he's into. Mm-hmm. So we can have a conversation, but there's a line of, hey, not for me.
Have you ever brought him to work?
I have not.
Okay.
No.
So he doesn't want to see it.
No. And I feel like I respect that.
Okay.
And I honestly think that kind of helps me. I have that boundary where, hey, I'm dealing with this all day. Sometimes on call at night, sometimes on a weekend, I'm getting questions. And then I can separate those things and be talking to people that have no idea. And it, removes my mind from dealing with that 24/7.
Yeah.
So it's good. He's very supportive. He, lets me talk when I need to talk, but he also gives me that boundary. So for me, I enjoy that. For some people, I know they want to talk things to death or, they want to get to nitty gritty. And it's like, he'll listen to, some
things.
things.
Want to share.
Right. Exactly.
I want you to know. I want to talk about my day.
Yeah,
I want you to have experienced what I go through and what I do.
Which to a degree, absolutely. I mean, we've been together for a very long time. I mean, and so I think he understands and he knows when I'm in the talking mode and when I'm not, and he knows how to kind of adjust the conversation, which is helpful to me. But I know some people feel like they have to have somebody in the field to fully understand them.
Well, let's talk about my police officers. What should a cop know before they go to their first autopsy?
Couple things stand out for me. One, I would say just process, just to understand, hey, what am I getting myself into? I think having a general idea of the steps of an autopsy makes sense.
Okay.
I would say the second one for me would be...
Because I did not get that.
Yeah.
I walked in, I literally don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, and now we're doing this.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm just along for the ride.
Yeah, I'm just thinking somebody who's absolutely never been to one, if they're going into it, having a general idea of the process, I think would be helpful. I think coming prepared is a big one. Where people they get so anxious and worked up, like, hey, I'm going to an autopsy. They kind of forget the part of, why are you coming?
Yeah.
You're coming because we need to answer some questions. There's a concern about this case, whatever the background is. Bring your report. Do you have scene photos? Putting context to things the doctor's not seeing any of that up front half the time.
Right.
So if you're bringing that with you to actually ask him questions while you're there in front of him and put things together with what you're seeing at exam, that's only going to benefit your investigation more. So I would say coming prepared is one that I think kind of people forget about because they assume they can get the records later and just, we'll answer those questions later. And then the third one I would say is understand that there's reasonable limitations to what what a forensic pathologist is going to be able to tell you.
Yeah.
If you're going into it, you're kind of like the public. You have a mindset of they're going to tell me exactly when they died.
Right.
Exactly
what answer every mystery.
Exactly what weapon was used, and that's just not the case. Like the autopsy and the scene investigation are just like step one.
Yeah.
In a death investigation. That's just the medical portion of it. And now we've got to build everything else over the next 2 months of medical records, toxicology, following up with family. What are you finding in your investigation? You're not going to have all the answers on day one. And I think people assume that the doctors can give more in that moment than they really can. They can definitely answer things, but...
How do you think an autopsy affects the average officer? I mean, they come in, whether they're a CSI tech, which, and those guys, bless their hearts, they are getting up close, taking pictures on scene and at the autopsy. I mean, they're getting, within inches of everything.
Yeah.
But our detectives too. Our detectives, feel an obligation to be there, especially if they were to ever be asked in court.
Right.
Did you bother to go to the autopsy? I mean, we have several detectives who are like, absolutely, I was at the autopsy.
Yeah.
But it's going to have an impact on them to go. What do you think that impact is? How would you describe it?
Kind of how I mentioned earlier, like disassociating. I feel like it's kind of that original thing of like out of body experience at first, maybe. Yeah. And then again, depending on how comfortable they are with an actual body.
Yeah.
The senses, the blood, smell, all those things, depending. I feel like that kind of sticks with you initially. And then it's the disassociating and kind of being out of body. And then afterwards, I call it like reflecting. Then you start kind of wishing you had asked more questions, or then it causes you to have more questions.
Yeah.
So then you're kind of in this limbo of I need to answer things and get more information. So that part I think is helpful to an investigation, but I feel like it almost makes you feel like you need to be doing more, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, okay, now that I've seen extent of injuries, or now that I've got these questions, now I have to go talk to the family. It just gives you more obligations and more questions that can kind of be, I would say, a strain if you're attending autopsies all the time, because it's just constant. You're viewing that, and then you're going and getting questions and talking to family and grieving with them. I would think it builds up quickly, I guess.
I don't know what I expected as far as the smell, and there were 2 cadavers in the room when I was there, and the smell is prominent. But I think the first thing that struck me was it smells worse on scene.
That was a question I had for you. Is it, when you're first coming in, again, I'm like rethinking back to my initial viewing. I feel like the smell is the first thing because you're opening the door and that's the first thing that hits you from a senses standpoint. Yeah. So depending on what cases we have going on that day, is that something right off the bat that's turning you off to it, and now you're thinking of that and not focusing on what you're there for?
Well, the autopsy suite is sterile.
Yeah.
And so the room itself smells clean. and that is not the case on scene. On scene, somebody's out there in all of the filth.
Right.
And I have a pretty strong constitution. I've never vomited on a scene, but I've been at hundreds of death scenes, and in each of those death investigations, I've smelled far worse than what was going on at the autopsy.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And I think it would be how often somebody's going to those scenes.
Yeah.
For them to really tie that together of, which one's worse kind of question. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we've had our experience with hoarder houses and feces, and the way some people live sometimes is amazing.
Yeah. Everything else. Yeah. And of course, decomposition, but mercy's sakes, I was expecting worse.
Okay.
And so it was prominent, even strong in a way, but it was a strong smell in an otherwise sterile environment. I felt it wasn't as bad as I was expecting.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
So,
yeah, and there's airflow. There's things we do to combat it, obviously, too, right? Yeah. So, airflow, that sort of thing. It's not like we're having you intentionally try to smell those things. So it's kind of a weird...
There were moments that were worse.
And again, depending on the cases you're doing, like we'll process around 6 to 8 autopsies a day. So if it's a law enforcement case, you could have had an exam before you that was decomposed, and now you're coming into a fresh body, and it kind of takes you off guard.
Yeah.
So it kind of just day to day depends as well.
Yeah. So officer coming in and doing, the first autopsy they observe, or the first several, that kind of thing, there's going to be an impact. Just you're seeing a human body like you've never seen it before.
Right.
And this is a very clinical procedure that's being done. But boy, you're going to see that body in a light like you've never seen it before.
Right.
And that's what I was not ready for.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is something. And the further we got into it, for me, the better it was, because even though it was more, I don't know if gory is a fair way to describe it, but it was more involved, but it was also less I was dissociating the fact that it was a person.
Right.
And now we're talking about body parts and what happened to this part of the body that caused the death. And it was more about the question and the parts than it was about the whole person. And the further I was from the whole person, the better I felt.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And so actually the initial cut bothered me more than some of the more involved, removing organs and stuff like that. That was less, that bothered me less. What do you think the average cop is going to, are they going to, how do you think they're going to process that?
I think somewhat similar. I think it would just depend on that specific person. Because I think we mentioned it earlier. To me, it's going to go one of two ways. If you're focusing on the first things that you're noticing, so like the smell, sounds that you may be hearing, if you're not good with blood, syringes, those sorts of things that might trigger somebody's response.
Yeah.
If they're focusing on that, they're going to go one way. And we've had people faint, we've had people throw up. That's not unusual. I tell people, we're the weird ones in a nice way. It is not normal to just day to day be eviscerating bodies and seeing death over and over and over, 8 times a day if you're doing exams.
Yeah.
So we are the weird ones. You're not. That's a normal response by your body for good reason.
Yeah.
So it's not anything that we ever judge if that does happen. We have interns, law enforcement. I mean, I think people think law enforcement need to be strong, steady, I'm going to stand and watch this. And then I've had some completely collapse. It just totally depends on that person's body and what they're noticing.
Yeah.
So,
your crew were really good to us. Because there was a CSI officer, a detective, myself, and an intern. Mm-hmm. And they're like, look, if you want to have a seat, stand right here. You'll be fine. And our attention was divided because we were having conversation. We were talking about the case. We were talking about vacation. We were talking about all kinds of different things. And we didn't have to, the CSI officer, he had his camera out. So he was involved very directly, but we were able to kind of distract ourselves also as we were going through that, especially for me for my first time.
Yeah. Coming solo versus with somebody. That's a great, if a trigger for you is going to be, okay, I'm going to get nervous, and being able to talk it out with somebody while you're watching, obviously a big help if that's a trigger to you. So if they go the route with the senses, then, that's when we kind of see where they focus on that too much and they can't really come back from it. The other avenue is, like you said, once you get past those things and you see the initial cut or incision, then it turns into, now I'm thinking medical. Now I'm more curious, I would say, and I want to see what the organs look like. And I want to see, what's the injury look like there? And you're wanting to ask the doctor questions. I think if people can really hone in on that and focus on that part of why you're there, we're trying to determine cause and manner. So let's look for what that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
The more you lean into that and kind of get past that initial shock and senses, I think that's really the people that can come more frequently, they really hone into that and take off from there.
The ones who adjust really well to it, what do you think they're doing right?
Asking questions.
Okay.
If there's something you're not sure about, or like I said, identifying your triggers. If, you notice when they go to cut somebody's rib cage and they're using, I call them loppers, but
like big giant pruning.
Yes. Pruning loppers is what they use. And a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, even equipment, they have no idea that's stuff that we use because it seems so simple.
Yeah.
Ask questions. Okay, why do you guys use that? Okay, that's what you're going to use. Now you're going to hear the sound. Asking those questions and getting past those.
Did not sound like I thought it would.
Yes, exactly.
At all. In my mind, I'm like, oh, here it comes. And I'm like,
oh,
well, that didn't sound like I thought it would.
Right.
And so it was, that was fascinating.
Yeah. And same with, the circular saw for the skull.
Yeah.
That's another big one. You're using a saw, you're making a lot of noise.
I've heard officers say that was their tipping point.
And having them understand, how we do that. These are the cuts we're going to make. I always try to preface it, when you go to remove the skull cap after they make those cuts, there is a certain sound that makes when you're kind of separating it from the dura and from the brain, letting people know that's coming.
Yeah.
Which I think is just, you build a bond with the technician, you know what they're going to do, their next steps, it's coming. And so it becomes less and less abrasive to you.
I feel like the CSI officer and the detective were not giving me any heads up. I think they were kind of testing me.
Yeah.
I think they're like, look at this. I'm like, oh.
You're like, wow, that's what it looks like, all together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
And they did nothing to warn me at all. And so, but it was fine.
And I don't think I gave them the reaction they wanted. They were like, "Oh, here it comes. Look at this, chap." You know, and so yeah.
Yeah, it is funny. I don't know if you want to put this in there, but it is funny to me, obviously being a female. And then, my job, I'm eviscerating a body and I'm watching a grown man over there gagging and, barely maintaining composure.
They probably feel like they have to in front of you.
Well, that's what I said. People, I think they have to do that, or, they're in a medical setting and they feel like they have to, and then they have those natural reactions. But it is a little comical sometimes, if you're,
That's funny.
That is funny.
Are there ever times where you're in the autopsy suite? This is the third autopsy you've done today, and the detective walks in and he's been talking with the family, and they're grieving. Have there ever been disconnects where maybe you're being a little too clinical and insensitive even to the detective?
I would say so. I would say it's not so much, our employees are actively trying to be that way.
No.
It's more so a detective is, emotionally charged from the situation. They're taking it one way, or like you just said, they just got done talking to family, and then somebody over here is talking about, what they're going to have for lunch today in the middle of an autopsy.
Yeah.
There is a disconnect there. Yeah. Not
should be clinical.
Right. Not intentionally, but it is there. And it's,
and you have to be dissociated. You have to be detached.
Right.
To keep doing this and to do it well. And to bring light to a situation that needs it, you have to be detached.
Right.
But I can imagine, I know some emotional detectives.
Yeah.
And I can imagine them being offended.
And rightfully so. I mean, again, they're the ones dealing with the family. And I think it's one of those things you just have to kind of remind them, hey, we're not, we're doing this for this family.
Yeah.
And we have to do it a certain way, and we have to follow certain processes. And there's a reason why we're doing this, is so that we can get you that answer to then turn around and give it to family. So we're really benefiting family, but we do have to kind of do boundaries and do disconnection to get past those cases, or else how are we going to do all these cases?
Yeah. What would you want a police officer to know about what you do?
I would say that it's a lot more well-rounded, and we can offer a lot more if you're communicating and coordinating well. Let's say somebody calls in a scene to us. We're not the ones directly on scene. Let's say it's an out-of-county one. The body gets transported to us. We do an exam. Let's say nobody attended. All we have at that point are what you verbally told us and what we saw medically. And then we're going to draw conclusions based on, the rest of our investigation, our medical legal investigation. We'll follow up with family. But if there's things that from an investigative standpoint, and you have, the more you share that with us, the more you communicate, the more you ask questions, the more you coordinate. Can I come to the exam for XYZ reason? The family's asking this question. I saw this on scene. The more we're going to tie things together, the more information we're going to give you, the better that investigation is going to be.
Okay. So don't leave the pathologist out of the loop.
Yeah.
And then expect them to provide miracle answers.
Right.
When you've given them almost nothing to work with except for the body.
Exactly.
Right.
And then I would say being very honest with family up front about expectations. I think that's a big one that we deal with the public, where, it's the day and age where they think everything is done in 2 seconds. And like I said, the scene investigation, the autopsy, that's the very first step.
Yeah.
We're talking, usually reports are 8 to 12 weeks, just kind of general. And people are always like, why does it take that long? You did the exam on Thursday. Why don't you have the results on Monday? Toxicology, medical records, histology. Do we need to look at things under the microscope? Now we needed to go back and talk to that detective. Do we have their report? Do we have, all the family information? I mentioned donation.
Are there tests that are sent offsite?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so got to wait for those to travel to another lab or whatever, and then come back. And
And then you've got the more expanded ones of, are we talking a skeletal case, where we have a lot less to deal with body condition wise, and now we're doing consults, anthropology. Are we getting identifications confirmed? DNA can take months. I mentioned donation.
DNA is not done in the span of a commercial break?
No.
Right?
But the show Bones told me they got it in 2 days. No, it takes months.
Yeah.
And depending on how you go about the funding for that, KBI is a great resource, but is it something where we're trying to identify a cold case or something where we're having to use NamUs and these DNA labs that are helpful, but obviously they take time to do that work. I mentioned donation earlier. If, you're coming to an autopsy and that person was an organ donor before they got to us, let's say you have a question that family asked you, did they have some heart disease or is it something genetic with the heart? What if the heart was donated? The doctor can't even look at it. Yeah. So now we have to wait for donation records. Now we've got to, there's just pieces of a puzzle that they have to put together that I think the autopsy is one piece. And I think people think that's the end all be all where you're going to get your answers. And it's really way more expansive. So I think detectives and law enforcement understanding that and being able to relay that to family for expectations is huge as well.
Yeah. What do you like about working with law enforcement?
Not much. No, just kidding. No, like I said, I like being in the field and piecing things together. So I like understanding what they're thinking, what they're thinking from a criminal aspect or how it ties into them from like a judicial standpoint. Because I'm thinking medically, right? And like hearing the differences in their opinions on things and what their investigation shows. And I think that's really interesting because we don't always get to see the end result. Of court. Like our doctors will go, but like our investigators and our techs rarely are going to court. And so seeing all of it from start to finish is, I think, interesting. And that's the person really from start to finish, detective-wise, that's seeing that case through.
So Kelsie Gwartney, thank you so much for being in today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to thank Kelsie for letting me come in and observe an autopsy. I want to thank my detective who was there and my CSI officer who was there. They both made it a lot easier for the patrol chaplain to endure his first autopsy. I hope that you didn't find the topic of episode 144 to be too gross. But I do think it's important for two reasons. First, I think that it's important for chaplains to experience what their officers go through. I feel like that is the secret sauce, the superpower that chaplains have, is that we can be alongside our officers. And secondly, to get the opportunity to hear somebody who's done hundreds of autopsies give an insider's point of view on how to get through it. That is very much the kind of information that I'm always looking for. And I hope it helped you. Hey Chaplain is a free resource for everyone because of those supporters who are quietly helping behind the scenes. If you want to help the show reach more cops, chaplains, and other first responders around the world, please follow the link in the episode description to support the show. The views expressed here are the personal views of the hosts and our guests and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain. And as always, let's pray for peace in our cities.